Welcome to Board Wrap-Up. Hope your summer's going well. It's the July Board of Education meeting, and the next time we talk to you, school will be beginning. Dr. Pennington, our guest, and we're going to talk about the board meeting, but it's been a busy summer for you, Dr. Pennington. People have been reading about some of the things you've been doing. You went on the East Coast for a while, didn't you?
I had an interesting last 2 weeks. In the 1st of July, in fact, July 1st, I was in Calgary for the meeting of the Canadian Association of School Administrators, AASA, which is the National Superintendent Association of the United States. We have a partnership with the Canadian group. And, it was really interesting. I think anytime you have a chance to learn from other people and, education is education. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, English, everything, science, it's all the same, but they do it a little differently than we do. I don't think it's better than what we do. It's just different. So I had a chance to talk to them, and we really all face the same challenges. Everybody is concerned about how do we raise the educational level of our population. How do we prepare young people for the world they're going to live in? How do we help more students be college ready, but how do we help more students be career ready so that so they're not trapped in low wage jobs? Obviously, we need you think about all the jobs that exist in Ponca City. We need people who work at fast food restaurants. We need people who wait on tables. But we also need machinists, and we need welders, and we need people that have technical skills that I don't even know what they are. We need doctors, lawyers, business people. So, how do you create an education system which allows all young people to reach their fullest potential, whatever that might be? So it was an interesting discussion with some great professionals, so it was really cool. I had to tell you, the first day we were there was Canada Day, which is the equivalent of their July 4th. And so we went down into Calgary. We were staying at a hotel out by the airport, and they had a festival going on, had lots of things, and they had a big fireworks display. But it didn't start till 11 o'clock, and I remember telling Tara, I said, well, that's an odd time for a fire. That's here we do it at 9 o'clock.
Right.
Well, I realized at 10:45, when the sun was still out, why they didn't do their fireworks display till 11. I'd forgotten that, just that little bit north, they get into the longer days in the summer and the shorter days in the winter. So that was a little cultural experience, and so it was a good trip. Learned a lot, and it was something I got to do. And then last week, I had my installation as president of AASA, and the highlight of the night was the performance by the members of the Ponca tribe. And it was, we take that cultural type of event for granted in Oklahoma. Here in Ponca City, we have the Ponca powwow, we have the Standing Bear powwow. There are other powwows throughout the area, and we have all kinds of opportunities to see those individuals show their culture and participate in those events. But a lot of people in the country have never seen anything like that. And for lots of individuals who were in attendance, we had over 200 superintendents from all across the country that attended that event, and lots of them came to me later and said they had never. They just had never seen anything like it, and they were so impressed with the students, and so it was a good event. Obviously, it was for me, it was a humbling experience to be. It was humbling last year to be chosen to lead AASA. Now that I'm in the process of doing that, it's even more so the responsibility. And people have asked me, well, why do you do that? What benefit does the school district get? I think that education is not different than any other business. It's all about connections. I had an opportunity last week to spend a lot of time with a company called Blackboard, which they provide lots of platforms and ways for parents to connect with schools. The system we use to call out when we have bad weather, Blackboard has bought that company. We're in the process of discussing with them an app that you'll be able to put on your phone that will give you access to attendance and checking your students' grades and that kind of stuff. It's just another move into the future, And because of this, we're going to get to see things a little bit early. And then in the end of August, I actually go out and go to Apple. They're conducting a national grant program for schools, which none of our schools qualify for because your free reduced lunch numbers have to be 98% or above. But I'm having an opportunity to go out there and read some grant applications and see what Apple's looking for when they give money away. And so hopefully that'll translate into us maybe being able to develop a partnership with them and do some things for our kids. And so it really is all about connections. And then nothing else, we get to, that means that every time I do something now, the Ponca City, Oklahoma comes up, and it's a chance for me to talk about our community and the good things that we have going on here, not only educationally, but the community, and really to tell our story of what this community's been through. I mean, you think about it. When you think about what happened to us a few years ago when ConocoPhillips made the decision to move all those jobs out of town, and then we lost the Tyson plant, that would have devastated a lot of communities. But we have survived that. We're different, but we're as stronger than we were. We all have seen the apartment or the townhouse complex that went in out by Lincoln School. There's another housing addition getting ready to be built out where the old airline or the old drive-in used to be. So there's lots of things happening in our community. And back in 2008, 2009, I think there were lots of people in town who thought we were done. There were some who wanted to roll up the streets and say that this community's done with, but we're not. We have a bright future, and hopefully, I can tell that story. Because you don't know who's listening. You don't know who you're going to influence that might have a business of some kind or an interest or whatever.
Congratulations, by the way, on all those honors. You and I visited about 30 days ago, right before the elections in June, and one of those elections was for state superintendent of schools. I want to ask you, were you surprised by the outcome, and what most surprised you about the defeat of Janet Barisi?
Well, it's funny. The day of the election, I actually made a phone call to the director of the Cooperative Council of School Administrators, and I told Stephen Crawford, who's our director, I said, it's not going to surprise me if Janet Barisi finishes third in this election. And the reason for that, there were a couple of reasons for that. One, the survey that came out right before the election that showed that she was second in a three-person race, that she was only 1 point ahead of a guy named Brian Kelly who didn't campaign, and then the large number of people were undecided. And I thought there was a good chance that undecided vote was going to break for either Brian or Joy. I did not think undecideds were going to vote for Janet Barisi. I mean, I think you knew where you were with her. You knew what you felt. So I won't say I predicted it, but I had a hunch that might happen. And then there were two things that happened that weekend that didn't get a lot of statewide coverage. I don't think they made the Oklahoma City paper, but they were in the Tulsa paper. One of them was an event that Superintendent Barisi was at with some teachers in the Oklahoma City area, where she tried to tie what had happened with Common Core to the events in Moore and the tornado damage that was done and the devastation that community suffered, and that blew up on social media. And you had lots of teachers in Moore who were sharing statewide that Superintendent Barisi came to Moore after the tornado, made us a lot of promises, didn't fulfill any of them. You had a statement by the Moore superintendent which said that what we've been through here for this community has been very devastating. We've rallied together. We've done a great job. We've worked hard. Don't affiliate us with political things. You also had one of the vice mayor of Moore do the same thing. So you had that in the Oklahoma City area on social media, which was, again, just a kind of it was just not it was not the right thing to say. And then at the same time, she had gone to a chamber event in Tulsa and had made a statement where she said that the University of Oklahoma had repudiated the research done by the Oklahoma University and Oklahoma State University professors on the ADF grade card. And she said she'd actually been contacted by OU and they'd apologized to her for that. Well, immediately those researchers went public and said very, bluntly that that had never happened. And that, they stood by their research and really, there's lots of stuff that goes on and it's called research. And so somebody, writes an article, does a little study. But the OU and OSU A to F grade card research is top level research. They didn't just conduct their study and look at the data and make decisions. They sent that off to third parties, people who are experts in research, not education research, but research in medical science, research in physics. There are people who are experts in research, and had them look at their methodology, had them look at their data, and so that if there's a blue ribbon for valid research, the research study by OU and OSU on the ADF grade card received that stamp of approval. So you had those two events, which again call into credibility. So I wasn't. So those things all happened at the end, and my thought was that even if she were to get out of this, even if she were to win the Republican primary, she cannot win the general election after those two things become public and get into the wider sphere of things. I was surprised by the margin. I was surprised that she finished third. I kind of thought it might happen, but I would have thought it would have happened because Brian Kelly picked up a huge group of undecided voters, and he really didn't pick up any undecided. They all broke for Joy Hoffmeister. So, but here's the other deal. I was in Washington last week, and a part of the installation, we also have a legislative conference with AASA. Everybody across the country knows that. And so people are trying to look at this and go, so what does this tell us about education policy nationwide? Because there's in the reform initiatives that Janet Barisi advocated for were a package put together by a group called the Foundation for Education Excellence. And there were about 12 state superintendents across the country in 2010 who embraced those initiatives. Tony Bennett in Indiana, Janet Barisi, there's a gentleman in West Virginia who's since retired, the state superintendent in New Mexico, state superintendent in Arizona, and I forget who the others are. Well, Tony Bennett, when he ran for re-election in 2012, was defeated in a general election by a third grade teacher who had no political experience. Janet Barisi has gone down. The superintendent in New Mexico is in trouble, and the superintendent in Arizona is in trouble. They don't expect those two to win re-election in November. So that reform package, which says we're going to hold kids back in third grade who don't pass a reading test, we're going to grade schools A to F, we're going to use student test scores as part of teacher evaluation. Though that policy, once it gets out into public purview, is not something that the public in general seems to support. And those people who have tied their political career, so to speak, to that type of reform package are not being successful when voters have had a chance to sit down and look at it and discuss it. So I think there are some implications nationwide because that really is the same reform package the Obama administration pushes. So I think it's got some interesting political ramifications. Of course, our concern right now is what does it do to our relationship with the federal government and the waiver that we received. In theory, now that Common Core has been rejected, which is another issue, not necessarily tied to Janet Barisi, but I happen to think that Common Core went down as big as it went down because of her steadfast support for Common Core over the last year. She kind of backed off this legislative session, but in the past she had been a very strong supporter of Common Core. And so I think one reason the legislature reacted the way they did was because of their dislike of her. But so anyway, what does that do to us? How does that affect our because the federal government, while they only give us about 15% of our money, they make 95% of the rules. So you know, we've got interesting things going on. There's actually a case before the Supreme Court. They're going to hear arguments this week about the constitutionality of the law that was passed by the legislature. So there's lots of stuff going on education-wise, education policy that kind of puts us in limbo right now, and as we wait to see, you know, what the feds do.
I don't want to beat this to death, but I do have two more questions about her leadership until November. She is still the
For
superintendent
7 months.
until the general election in November. What do you see between August and November that can happen that might affect our school systems?
Well, the first thing is, let's say that the Supreme Court rules in favor and supports the legislation that was passed. And so Common Core is out in Oklahoma. And the issue with that law is not Common Core, it's the amount of authority it invests in the legislature to determine what the new standards will be. We've been very fortunate in Oklahoma that most of our education policy has been able to stay out of partisan fights. And we've been able to develop standards kind of outside of political stuff. Without, you know, there's lots of controversies sometimes in education. And we've been able to stay out of those because it's been a function of the State Department of Education to set standards, and then local school districts could take those standards and basically improve on those. Now this new law puts all that authority in the legislature, and so let's say that law is upheld. Now it's up to Janet Barisi and her State Department of Education to write new standards. Well, you know, so what do those standards look like? Do you set standards that are impossible for Oklahoma schools to meet? Do you set standards that are so low that, I mean, there's just, you know, I worry about that. I worry about somebody whose view of schools is that public schools don't do a good job, and creating a system that we are doomed to fail in. So that concerns me. And I don't know that that'll happen, but that worries you. Obviously, there are lots of decisions about state budget and allocation of funds, and you know, all the rules that we operate under. You know, we really are in a unique situation here. We've never, to my knowledge, ever had this happen, where we've had a sitting state superintendent who sought re-election, and, well, we've never had anybody defeated in a primary. The only sitting state superintendent that we ever had, to my knowledge, defeated in a general election was when Sandy Garrett ran for state superintendent 24 years ago, and she defeated a gentleman named Gerald Hetzel. Now, what had happened is the elected state superintendent, John Folks, had left that job as state superintendent of instruction in Oklahoma and taken a superintendent's job in Texas. Gerald Hetzel was appointed to fulfill the rest of John Folks' term, and then by Henry Bellman. Henry Bellman was the governor, and Gerald Hetzel was a Republican also. But then Sandy Garrett ran for state superintendent and defeated Gerald. And it wasn't, but, you know, nobody expected Gerald Hetzel to win, and he'd never been elected anyway. So this is the first time anything like this has happened, where you actually have a lame duck state superintendent who is not lame. You know, when Sandy decided not to run for election, she was a lame duck, but she was a lame duck by choice. And in the past, that's what would happen. Somebody would be state superintendent for a while, they decide not to run again. And so that's a different deal than when you've been defeated in an office, in a position that has really lots of authority in how we operate on a day-to-day basis. So, you know, people are, you know, and you can convince yourself of conspiracies, and if you're not careful, you can, you know, you can make things maybe worse than they are. We'll just have to wait and see. My concern is, and this is really, and I actually had a conversation with an official from the U.S. Department of Education when I was in D.C., we've got a situation where if this happens, we've got these new standards we're supposed to put into place, but we have a new state superintendent coming in who has, campaigned on this idea that we're going to build an education coalition where we're going to involve parents, teachers, administrators, business people, and that we're going to come together in Oklahoma and we're going to develop an education blueprint that everybody sits at the table and helps develop. Well, that's going to take time to do that. You can't do that in 6 months. You can't do that. You can't do that quickly. So, from my perspective, what's more important is that we get this right, whether we just do it quickly. And so, my hope is that maybe the Department of Ed, obviously, they know what happened in the election. They know what happened with state government with the law to do away with Common Core. That maybe they would just back off a little bit and say, and give Oklahoma a chance to do what the voters in Oklahoma want done. I think at the end of the day, what we saw in that election was that Oklahoma wants cooperation when it comes to our public schools. We want interested parties to have a seat at the table. That takes longer to do, And I think if you go back and look at the waiver that Oklahoma first presented to the Department of Ed, the idea was your state, somehow you were going to have you're going to have stakeholder meetings, you're going to discuss all this, develop a waiver. Well, the federal government didn't give states enough time to do that. And so that was not a part of the process for the waiver we have now. Hopefully, and I think that happens regardless of who wins the general election. If Joy Hoffmeister wins, she's already said that's what she wants to do. I think that John Cox is a consensus builder. I see John doing that. And to some extent, I see Fred Adeskin doing that. Because I think that the one thing that is the glaring mistake of the Barisi administration is that they did not listen to all voices. She listened to the state chamber voice and the charter school voice and really the anti-public school voice more than she listened to people involved in public education. And the reality is, guys, in Oklahoma, I think it's like 98% of our kids attend public schools. So to chop that group out was at the end of the day her big mistake. And so look, we have to have everybody at the table. We have some big decisions to make about education in this state. We have to bring the business community in. We have to listen to them and say, what is it that you need? We have to let the people who are critics of public education have a role at the table. That doesn't mean we have to agree with everything they say, but they have to have a role. And then we have to have parents, teachers, superintendents at the table, because end of the day, superintendents have to implement through teachers and school board members what it is that the state tells us they want to do. And so we have a better chance to get this right if we do that. We're not going to see eye to eye on everything. I mean, but we have to talk to each other. The thing that lots of people forget about schools. We're into this world right now where we're always talking about preparing people for work and job training, and it's almost like education is a job training tool. Well, okay, that's part of what we do. I mean, we get kids prepared to go to work, but at the end of the day, we are about developing human potential, and that is not just work related. It's about it's about experiences. It's about appreciation of literature and appreciation of art and physical activity and lifestyle and all those kinds of things. And the other key thing is that we prepare citizens to live and work in a democratic society. And so that's a critical part of what we do. And that's not just math and science that does that. It's about working together. It's about understanding people of diverse backgrounds. It's about culture. It's about all those kinds of things. And so we don't just do education to fulfill the needs of business. You don't have to have, you can have successful business, you can have successful corporations without living in a democracy. It's what China does. They have a communist system, it's controlled. They have businesses that do very well, but they don't have democracy. And so we have to always remember that's a critical part of what we do. And too many times we get so focused on business and industry and what the corporate world needs that we forget about the democratic piece. People outside of education do that. Those of us inside don't do that. And that's part of that struggle. But we have to, again, we have to talk and meet and work that stuff out.
If you could, highlight the July board meeting and some of the things you'd like your constituents to know about that meeting.
Well, the main thing is we now have planned, we've got our contracts done to allow us to get started on the renovation of Woodlands, which we think will take about 9 months. So, hopefully this time next year, Woodlands will be done, ready to go. And we'll be, and remember that for this next school year, Woodlands is going to be at Washington. So it's Washington Woodlands, is the way we need to think about it. The best news is we, with the exception of a high school art position, we have every teaching position filled. And I will tell you that's been the biggest, in my 20 years as a school superintendent, this is the hardest it's ever been to find staff. We've had to make some changes. We actually had to, in the past 12, 14 years, we've had two at elementary level that were assigned to do our gifted and talented program. We've had to pull those people back into the classroom because we just couldn't find staff. We could not find teachers to teach every position we had. We're still looking for, if we can find, we'd like to find 2 more teachers so that we can fill, we have some curriculum specialist positions that are open. We would like to fill those. We think those are critical in helping teachers master their craft and help us make sure our curriculum's aligned and that we're doing the kind of things we need to do in writing and math to help kids be as successful as they can be. And so we've got 2 positions open, but we've not filled those positions because we've been filling the classroom vacancies we had first that were vacancies because of resignations. And so now that we've got those filled, we're going to start looking at those curriculum specialist positions. If we can find additional classroom teachers, then we'll have some curriculum specialists, which again we think are critical. So if anybody out there, if you know somebody who's certified to teach art at the secondary level and they're looking for a job, they need to contact Shelley Arrett at the Ponca City Board of Education, and we'll sure interview them and see if they're a good fit for our district. I never dreamed that you wouldn't be able to find an art teacher. That's been the biggest surprise this year. We're not, and again, our patrons are going to hear more about this because this is an issue across the state of Oklahoma. We are having trouble finding teachers now. So why is that? Because again, I was in meetings with superintendents from all across the country last week, and I asked that question: What are you guys having trouble finding teachers? No, So why are we having problems in Oklahoma? Well, the climate that has existed with education in general for the last 4 years, specifically the actions of the state superintendent, the reform agenda passed by the legislature, has discouraged young people from not only going into education, but when they finish their education, they're looking to go somewhere else to teach. Teacher salary. It's always been a problem in our state. We've always paid less than the regional average. But that gap between what we pay and what they pay in Arkansas, Texas, Kansas, Missouri, New Mexico, and Colorado is bigger than it's ever been. And we're going to have to address that unless our solution is to pull anybody off the street and put them in a classroom. And I really don't think we want to do that. So, we don't have to pay as well as those states do, but we've got to be close enough in pay that as a young person graduating from college and they think about, well, do I want to move 5 hours from home? What is the price tag for that? Is it our salaries are within $5,000 of that job? Are they within $2,000? What is that? But, look, when Shelley Eric came back from the Oklahoma State job fair, her story is that she is sitting next. We've got our Ponca City booth with all our stuff, and we've got jobs, and we're talking to teachers who are going through about, you want to come to Ponca City and teach. She is sitting next to Garland, Texas. And Garland, Texas has a sign up that says, starting year teacher salary, $45,000 a year. Plus, I think a $2,000 signing bonus. That is, the salary alone is $13,000 a year more than we pay a first-year teacher. Now, what would you advise your son or daughter or grandson or granddaughter to do? Graduate from Oklahoma State, got a great education, ready to go teach. What are you going to, mom and dad, grandma, what are you going to tell them? What are you going to tell them? To go to Garland. That's what you're going to tell them to do. And that's just one example. There are hundreds of districts in Texas that I could apply that to. And so, and we do this occasionally. We'll get in this situation, and then we'll give our teachers a big raise, and then we need to set a salary schedule for teachers in Oklahoma, and we need to consistently keep up with inflation and what the rest of the country does, if we want to have a great teaching force. Now, if that's not important, then we need to admit that. There's nothing that says that we couldn't in Oklahoma say we're going to let you teach school with an associate's degree. We could do that. I don't think we want to do that. I don't think that's best for kids. But if we want to do that, if we want to be cheap about it, then we just need to admit that we're cheap, and we need to do that. Or we need to redirect more state resources to public schools, which I know is, again, in our state, we don't like to talk about taxes. We love tax cuts, whatever. At least the politicians of the state think there's not a tax cut they don't like. But we cannot. We've proven it now. We can't continue to cut taxes and staff our schools at the level that we want our staffs to be. Broken Arrow has contacted everybody that they've interviewed for the last. I know for the last 2 years, and I know that they've reached out to people who taught for them as long as 10 years ago to see if they'd be interested in coming back to Broken Arrow schools. You never had to do that. If schools like Broken Arrow, you post that you had a third grade teaching job, you'd have 100 applicants. I mean, the idea that you're contacting people that you interviewed that maybe you offered them and they went someplace else, or maybe you didn't offer them, but you're contacting them again, or you've got teachers who left your employment to move somewhere else, and now you're contacting them to see if they want to come back. I mean, that's just unheard of. I mean, I just cannot imagine that. And so we actually, we're very fortunate. We kind of put an off call out and said, hey, faculty, staff, you need to let everybody on your social media that we're looking for teachers, elementary teachers specifically, and if you've got friends, neighbors, relatives. And we actually had one of our assistant principals was talking to his mom and dad who attend church in Broken Arrow, and they had a friend of their church who had a daughter that had gone to a teacher's college in Indiana and was looking for a job. Hadn't found one in Indiana, kind of wanted to come back to this part of the country. So we contacted her. We hired, Skype interview, we hired her. And we asked her, said, hey, you got any friends that you graduated don't have jobs? So she posted something on Facebook about, hey, any of you guys still looking for jobs? I've got to go to work in the Ponca City Public Schools in Ponca City, Oklahoma, and they're looking for teachers. We got another young lady from Indiana. Now we've never would have done anything like that. And that's really where we are. And so, we need to make some big decisions about teachers in Oklahoma, and do we want them or not? What's amazing, when I graduated from college in 1977, you would go to a job fair at OSU. I can remember, what we used to do, schools would come and they'd say, we're interviewing for history jobs or elementary, and you'd have a sheet that you'd sign up on. On the elementary job sheet, it would be pages of people signing the interview for elementary jobs. When I applied for a social studies job, I would be one of 50 applicants for every social studies job that came to OSU to recruit. Today, we're lucky when we advertise for a job, social studies coaching job, we might get 3 applicants. That's really the situation we're in. And at the end of the day, it doesn't increase quality. You're only as good a school district as the people in your classrooms. And we have to recruit with every occupation that's out there. So we have to recruit with business, the College of Business, the College of Engineering, Ag Science, home ec. We got to recruit with all. We got to compete with all of them, and we can't just give up and say, well, we're going to let the College of Business have the top 20 high school graduates, top 20%, or we're going to let engineering have top 5%. We have to be able to compete with those people. There are individuals who have engineering, who we have teachers who could have been engineers if they wanted, but they wanted to teach. With those people who want to teach, we have to make it something that not only do they do it because they want to do it, but they do it because they can get paid to do it. None of us work for free, right? I mean, it's just we just got to be able to do that. We got to compete.
I thought you were a superintendent the day after you graduated in 1977.
No, sir, I was not.
That's a lot of work, isn't it, man?
It is a lot of work. It's been a lot of years, and those 20 plus years in the classroom, and now 20 years in administration, 23 years in whatever it is. I don't know what it is. I can't even keep track anymore of how many years it's been. But yeah, it's been a long time, and it's been again, it's been a great run, and it's not anything I intend to give up anytime soon. I like what I do, and obviously I like this community.
Well, next time we talk, school will be in session.
We'll be up and running,
Absolutely.
And again, we're looking for another great year. And the thing that I want to make sure people understand: have we struggled to find staff? Yes, but we have hired some great young people. We're just fortunate that there are still enough kids from rural Oklahoma who become teachers that they want to come to Ponca City. We don't have a lot of success with kids who grow up in Tulsa suburbs, Oklahoma City suburbs. They're not too interested in living in north central Oklahoma. But we still have, lots of kids who grow up north of Highway 51. If you think about how 51 runs in the state, those kids who grew up north of 51, there's still enough of those small town kids out there who want to be teachers, and they want to come to Ponca City. And we have a number of students who grow up here, go off to college, and they want to come back, and they've got teacher certification. So we're very fortunate. I'm not like any other person who has a business. When you interview, you want to interview 20 great candidates and pick the best one of that 20, rather than interviewing 5 great candidates and picking the one out of the 5. So.
Very good. Dr. Pennington, have a great month until you have to get back to it, obviously, and we'll see you in August. Chris Adams behind the cameras for Dr. Pennington. Have a great summer.